We'll give it a couple seconds, a couple more minutes as people are joining. Alrighty. Alrighty, I think we can get started. All right, so just a little bit of an introduction. So actually, before we continue to that, my name is Jessica Campos. I'm one of the career counselors here at the UCLA Career Center. I work primarily with our North Campus students. So those of you who are social sciences, welcome. I'm really excited to have you all here, as well as the first to go. So those of you who are first gen, you know, I develop programming for all of you who just want to explore different career options to help you in your journey here today. And so now I'll pass it on to Vanessa and Elaine.
I'll go.
Sorry, go ahead, Elaine.
I'm Elaine Delalis. I'm one of two advisors with the undergrad education office at the education department. If you are interested in the education and social transformation major or the education studies minor, you could either meet with myself or with Vanessa. I have previously been a graduate advisor in the department. So if you have questions about what that process could look like, you could always come see me and I could definitely be a resource for you.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I'm the other advisor for the undergraduate program. So like Elaine said, if you had any questions about our new major and of course the minor, please feel free to stop by and see us either via drop-in hours or send us a message via my UCLA Message Center.
Thank you both. So now we'll go on to just a little bit about what the Career Center offers. So I know many of you, hopefully you've been to our Career Center, used our virtual services. So just a really quick summary, we do have virtual career advisement appointments. So those are 30-minute one-on-one appointments where you talk to myself, to any of my other colleagues about just anything career. If you need assistance with your career exploration, your career planning, graduate school prep, you need your cover letter, you know, resume, personal statement looked at over and given feedback. We do that and so much more. And so please feel free to, you know, schedule an appointment to talk more about any career topics. We also have drop-in sessions. They're 15-minute drop-in sessions from Tuesday to Thursday, from 10 to 2. And so these are very specific 15 minutes where you can consult with someone about your resume, cover letter, or any job and internship search strategies. We also have really a lot of array of events and workshops that we offer throughout the quarter, this one being one of them. And so, you know, definitely take a look at our handshake list. We have career fairs, we have information sessions, and a lot of great events and workshops throughout the quarters. And just a lot of great things. We have a lot of resources to really help you navigate your time at UCLA and how, you know, to take better advantage of all the things that we offer. So please take a look at our handshake where all of our resources and everything that we have here is listed down below. Alrighty, so let's continue now to the part where all of you are here. So we're really, really excited to have our 4 panelists. Amy Cohen, she is the Community Partnerships Director at Radcliffe Institute at Harvard. She is also a full-time student here at UCLA. And I'll have her introduce herself a little bit later on. Justin Gelsizer, he's a postdoc research fellow at the Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital. We have Nora Hunter, graduate program advisor with UCLA Department of Psychology. And then Shane Welton, university recruiter for Teach for America at UCLA. So let's go on to our panel questions. So please tell us about yourself and your current role. What does a typical workday look like for you? So we'll start off with Justin.
Okay. So I'm currently a postdoc research fellow It's called the Stepping Strong Injury Prevention Center at Harvard Medical School and Brigham Women's Hospital in Boston. And basically a typical workday, because I have an office, but I've never seen it before. And I don't think I'll be able to see it. The postdoc might finish before that. So I have a really fun schedule. I create weird hours. I love working at night. I can't actually go physically into the hospital because it's not safe. And it's actually kind of the COVID epicenter for care for patients where my office is. So because I'm not a trained medical doctor, they want us to stay out. So yeah, postdoc research. I'm writing 2 main articles now, doing 2 large research studies. Some of you might have taken it actually. I think Amy Gershon sent out the link to all of you guys. So maybe you already know what I do. But yeah, pretty flexible. COVID kind of messed everything up, but it's going well. And I'm happy to talk to you more about what a postdoc is all about.
Thank you, Justin. Abby, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. When I first saw this question, I kind of laughed a little bit because a typical workday feels so far from our reality right now. But I am kind of living this like weird double life because I have started my PhD at UCLA in the urban schooling division this fall. So I'm in my 2nd quarter right now, but I'm also still working part-time on the East Coast where I was born and raised at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard as the community partnerships lead. So I'm living this like weird in between that probably wouldn't be possible if everything wasn't virtual. So it's this weird silver lining. But with that said, I spend my days going to class, reading a lot of books. And then on the flip side, I run a leadership program for girls in the Cambridge, Boston area that was supposed to be in person and is now virtual. So I do a lot of that. And then I bring a lot of community organizations, like grassroots organizations in the greater Boston area to Radcliffe events, which used to be in person and now are virtual. So a lot of different type of work. And it's really kind of unique and special to be able to be doing them at the same time. And they really help me. The school work helps the work and the work helps the school work. So it's this nice kind of practical experience that I'm actually pretty lucky to have. So looking forward to hearing what about others' typical work days in this non-typical setting.
Thank you, Abby. Would you like to go next, Shane?
Definitely. Hey y'all, I'm Shane. I am a double Bruin. I graduated from UCLA back in 2017, studied poli-sci and civic engagement, and post-grad I went off and taught with Teach for America. I taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade science to 210 kiddos every day. So Abby, I can relate. There is no day that looks the same as a teacher or as a recruiter now. So now I recruit for Teach for America. I'm a recruitment director. Basically, I get to talk about my students and my community that I absolutely adore every single day, all the time, which is great. And my typical workday, a lot of Zooms and phone calls, a lot of talking all the time, a lot of cough drops to help with that and tea. But also a lot of just getting to hear from students, hearing their experiences, hearing their stories, and helping them figure out what is kind of their best post-grad option for them. So that is kind of my favorite part of my work every day. And college students are a fun group to work with, so they definitely keep me busy. So my work days are always a little bit scattered, but a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zooms, and a lot of really deep conversations, which is always nice.
Thank you, Shane. And last but not least, Nora.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my current position right now is graduate program advisor with UCLA Psychology Department. And what that means is basically I work with students and faculty and make sure that everything's running smoothly in the program. So a typical work day for me is, I think like everyone else has said, a lot of different things, a lot of emails right now and Zoom meetings because we're remote. But also, you know, answering students' questions, making sure they're enrolled in their proper classes, helping with TA hiring, helping with admissions, planning events. it's really a lot of different things that all sort of focus on supporting the student experience and making sure that the program is working and running smoothly. And you know, my job specifically has seasons. So right now we're in admission season, which means, you know, a lot, like this week, almost all of my time has been spent, you know, planning interviews and events for the applicants to the program. But once that's over, once the faculty have chosen their students for next year, then it'll be a different season. You know, it'll be fellowships, and we're focusing on making sure students are turning in their stuff for fellowships on time and things like that. So it's a lot of different things. It's really never the same every day. I feel like at least once a week, there's some new problem or question that comes up that we have to solve, which kind of makes it an exciting job. Definitely every day is not the same. So that's something that's really cool about it.
Thank you, Nora. So it sounds like all of you have, you know, a lot of different hats that you're wearing. You're doing different things, which could be a good thing, I think, to kind of, you know, provide a different perspective and just new skills that you're learning within your job. So thank you all for sharing. So let's go on to the next question. So what made you clarify and choose your specific undergraduate degrees and career path? So Abby, would you like to start us?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't attend UCLA for my undergraduate. I attended Tufts University outside of Boston, which didn't have a education major. It just had a minor, and I know that the School of Education just created the major now. So I was kind of in this boat where I always knew I cared deeply about education. My family is like a family of educators, so we kind of joke like education's our family business, because literally everyone in my family is some type of teacher or works in the education system, broadly speaking. So I knew I always cared, but I think in part because everyone in my family was related to the education system, I was like, I'm not gonna do education. It wasn't even an option, but I kind of made that clear. And then I ended up studying psychology and essentially studying the intersections of education and psychology. So like apple doesn't fall far from the tree, for sure. I was, as a psych major, just like really interested in the psychological kind of implications of certain educational practices. One of those being what is called tracking or ability grouping, like when you place certain types of students in certain types of courses, maybe it's honors or remedial, and the implications of those choices, and often they're race-based and class-based. So that was the kind of focus I had as an undergrad, and a lot of that kind of pulled me forward to really think about education as a tool for social justice and ways to leverage the education system at different levels, like the macro, like policy level, to the micro classroom teaching experience. And that's kind of what, after graduating college, like what I did, I kind of did it at every level. And now I'm back at school figuring out how to keep pushing for that kind of social change and social justice piece that I'm hoping that we can all see within our education sector.
Thank you, Abby. Justin, would you like to go next?
Sure. So for undergraduate, I went to a little Christian liberal arts school called Eastern near Philadelphia. And I studied elementary education. So I became a certified K-6 teacher. Then I decided I loved teaching, and I spent several months in South Africa teaching first grade. And then I went to Costa Rica and taught there. Then I went to Japan for 3 years and just did a bunch of gap years because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. That led me toward a master's at the University of Pennsylvania in linguistics and education. And then I traveled some more, and eventually a PhD at UCLA. And so all those travels interspersed with education allowed me to keep refining my path and what I wanted to do. And then at UCLA for my PhD, I actually studied school shootings was my topic. And I was actually at UCLA in 2016 when we had a murder-suicide on campus. So I ended up writing my dissertation on that. And then that dissertation ended up leading me toward public health. And I'm still a visiting scientist at the School of Public Health at Harvard in Boston. And then that position allowed me then to get a postdoc position at Harvard Medical School. So I have no medical background. I have no public health background at the time. But I'd say like the advice I would give is kind of just follow your instincts and kind of the path that you choose for yourself. Usually from where you sit, you can't see it because you need other pieces need to move first before you can really know. And then as you move along, if you consistently stay what you're passionate about and you enjoy what you do, it shows in your work and people recognize that. And so, back when I was 19, 20, 21, I'm 37 now, trying to think about those 15 or so years, it's impossible, right? It just never would have happened. So for me to clarify kind of my path or my career, which is still being clarified, I'm applying for assistant professor jobs now. I might stay a second year for the postdoc. I just see it as long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I'm being authentic to my work, I'm pursuing my path, and in some way it's really helping somebody. It's really doing something for the community that's tangible. And that was one of the great things about kind of combining education with medicine and public health, because I felt like I had more teeth on my research that I could really apply it more. So that's kind of my general advice, kind of follow your gut and your instinct, be patient with that if you can, and you'll be amazed where you could end up. It could be anywhere in the world.
Great advice, Justin. Definitely something we all need to hear, right? And especially our students, being patient with yourself and your journey. Shane, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. So in undergrad, I studied poli-sci and civic engagement. I picked poli-sci because I did debate in high school and like enjoyed a US history class one time. I was like, that sounds fun. But for me, it was the civic engagement minor that was like really phenomenal. I believe it's called civic engagement and social change now, or community engagement and social change. But essentially for me, a lot of the work in that minor actually clarified a lot of my long-term paths. So part of the service learning courses at UCLA, which if y'all have not taken service learning classes at UCLA, would 10 out of 10 recommend them. I think I took like 7. Basically, you get an internship with typically a nonprofit organization or a public policy organization, and you actually get to get some hands-on experience. And for me, that was so, so important. I ended up getting my 10-week internship at People Assisting the Homeless and ended up staying for a year and a half there. And for me, I was working directly with individuals in low-income communities, people experiencing homelessness, and I ultimately saw the rates of homelessness continue to decline in Los Angeles and was like, I need to do something more to actually address the root causes of these issues rather than like housing people after they struggle with homelessness. I want to stop this from even being able to happen in the first place. And for me, a lot of that comes from policy making. A lot of that comes from education. And one of the earliest points where you can really impact people is with education, like understanding how important pre-K and 3K are for our students in our lowest income communities is so, so, so important. So for me, I heard about Teach for America, really had never planned on being a teacher before, but knew I wanted to make an impact in the education space. And I honestly felt kind of uncomfortable going into an education space without having taught. So that's why I decided to apply to Teach for America. Obviously ended up getting in, teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And now at the end of my 2 years of teaching, I had the choice to stay there and I really wanted to, but I had some family stuff bring me back to Southern California. And I love the work of recruitment now because I understand that this work is not one that like, I can solve educational inequity like alone, like y'all problem solved, go home, like we're good. Actually, like we have to bring more people into this work. And last year, 74 Bruins got into Teach for America and I advised them the whole part of the way through. And they're teaching 6,000 students every day now. And to me, that is actually how we achieve this sort of equity. So I'm not in recruiting because like recruiting's super fun. I'm in recruiting as a means to accomplishing a greater end of actually ending these inequities. So I also wholeheartedly want to echo Justin here for a second. Like I also am getting my MBA right now, which if you would have told me that back when I was graduating from UCLA, I would have been like, cool, my dad won. He finally made me go and get it. Like, am I also going to go work in a hedge fund now? Like what else is happening in my life? But I'm actually doing that to merge the sectors of the nonprofit sector, the business sector. And like, there are such important interconnectedness that you don't see until you actually get some real experience. So I highly recommend definitely not like setting yourself up on this path of like, this is the rest of my life for sure as you're exiting undergrad, because you have no idea what's going to be happening. And it could be within 4 years, you're getting a degree you never thought you were going to be getting. But yeah, I definitely want to echo Justin's sentiments there.
Thank you, Shane. And I definitely want to echo the service learning that you mentioned as well as like an opportunity to like gain experience in all these sectors and really understand if that's what you want or don't want, right? Because part of the process of figuring out and clarifying where you best fit in and where your passion really lies or where you can see yourself is by gaining experience. So thank you, Shane. Nora?
Yeah, so I also came from a family of educators, and I also was like, no way I'm going to go into education. So I also went to UCLA for undergrad, but I did musical theater. So completely left field. It was just something that I did in high school that I really loved doing, wanted to go on to do it. And when I graduated, I fully intended to continue with that career. But as I was sort of like auditioning and having odd jobs and stuff, I started working with high school students and I was teaching them theater things, but I just really, really loved working with them. And at the same time, I think I was like, I need a stable job where I know where the paycheck's coming next month. So I sort of thought about, you know, reassessed my values and thought, okay, well, I really like working with these students. Maybe just like my parents, I'm going to go into education. So I got my teaching credential. I taught second grade with LAUSD for a couple of years, and then I taught theater in elementary school with LAUSD, and I really liked it. Teaching is definitely a rewarding profession. It can also be crazy at times because kids are kids. And I think I just wanted to sort of explore what the other avenues in education were. I loved being on a school campus and I loved working with students, and I wanted to see how else I could do that. So I applied to different grad programs and I got into UCLA's Human Development and Psychology program within education. And as I was doing that and getting my MA, I also got a part-time job as an undergraduate advisor, so working with undergraduate students. And I just really enjoyed doing that. I liked working one-on-one with them and helping them, you know, figure out their schedules and telling them about the program and making sure they met requirements. And so once I graduated, I thought, okay, I'm going to continue to do this and go down this path and see where it leads me. So that's how I got to be a graduate program advisor. And, you know, it was kind of a roundabout way to get to education, but I still think even though my undergrad was in theater, which was totally unrelated, I still think there were skills that I learned in undergrad that have been very beneficial in the education world, like presentation skills and things like that. And so I think, you know, even if your undergraduate degree isn't necessarily directly connected to where you end up going, there are still so many skills that you learn that you can bring. And those skills can actually make you unique in your chosen career, and they can make you maybe stand out amongst other applicants. So.
Thank you, Nora. There's definitely a commonality of kind of where you started off in your first job, you know, after you graduated to where you are now. And I think that's one of the things I think that is so powerful about having you all here, because you're able to tell our, you know, our students that are watching right now that, you know, it's not like before where you have to stick to one career for the next 60, 70 years, right? There's always different paths that you can take. Some of you did teaching at first, and then we're like, that's really great, but I wanna try something different, or, you know, I see my skill set being in this to make a bigger impact, right? And so thank you all for sharing. So let's go on to the next question. So what were some career alternatives that you contemplated before pursuing your profession, and why was this profession a better fit? So who would like to start us off first? Nora, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So like I said before, my undergrad was theater. So the main other career that I contemplated was being in, you know, theater and auditioning for film and television and all that stuff. And I think I also mentioned that I wanted something a little more stable as a career, because theater is wonderful and I love it, but it is definitely a feast or famine kind of job. And you don't necessarily know when the next paycheck is coming. And I was far too nervous of a person to live that kind of life. So that's, I think, one reason why it's a better fit. You know, it's definitely a stable job, and you get benefits, and you get, you know, retirement and things like that in my position. But I think also, I just find a lot of meaning in working with students and in feeling like I can help them reach greater goals and support them. You know, I think when I used to tell people that I was an actress in LA, in my mind, it was like, oh, okay, sure you are. But when I tell people that I've been in education or I was a teacher, then, you know, I feel really proud of it. So I think that's another sort of something that was a clue that I was going down the right path for me. Feeling proud when I say to other people what I do.
Thank you, Nora. Shane, would you like to go next?
Definitely. I love this question because I considered all of the options. I considered most grad school besides for med school. I considered working in my hometown of San Diego at the nonprofit People Assisting the Homeless that I was talking about earlier. I considered going into more of a for-profit role. I considered going into the policy sector. I was really scared, honestly, as like a 21-year-old exiting UCLA, being like, I'm about to box myself into something, and like I care about 18 million things, and I don't know which one to pick. So I was exploring all of them, but I knew that no matter what, working in a classroom was going to get me opportunities to work hands-on with some of our lowest income communities. And the classroom really is the intersection of everything. So that was what led me to decide on teaching initially. And then now, leaning into recruitment, I have always known, ever since even my time when I was working as interns in undergrad, I knew that I didn't have to be the person directly doing the work in order to feel like I was still making an impact. There are some people who are like, I have to be the actively service provider. I have to be the one giving the food out. And I'm much more okay being like the person who like supports everyone. And while I do still look at teaching jobs relatively often, just in case I want to go back, I definitely like my role because I get to bring more people into this work. And I think that is exactly what we need. We need more of the right people in this work, in the world of education. So I think that's what makes recruitment kind of the right world for me to be in right now. But I don't know if it would have been immediately the right thing post-grad, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Shane. Abby?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said, I studied psychology. So the kind of follow up to that is usually becoming a therapist or going into school psychology or some kind of very specific career path. And something that I did senior year of college that I would definitely recommend to anybody and everyone, and something I still do today, is I just met with a lot of people, and they called them informational interviews, but I really just called them like coffee dates. And I got to go to all my favorite coffee shops when, you know, that feels like really far away right now. But it was really nice because I got to meet with all these people who had jobs that seemed intriguing, but like not so much. When I, you know, after I would meet with them, I'd be like, oh, that's like not really what I want to do. And it really was through those conversations that I got a glimpse of what the work actually looks like. So I kind of quickly realized I didn't want to go get my PhD in psychology or a PsyD degree, which are like all different ways in which you can go become a therapist. And really what I wanted to do was work with young people and kind of like we all have kind of echoed, just like see social change through education and find different ways to do that. And I think a lot of what Nora and Shane have already mentioned, like this idea of impacting change like through different people and different avenues, like education as a sector allows you to do that in so many different ways. And education is at its core intersects with every other sector. So for me, it like just made the most sense. And I think the kind of many hats I wear at this exact moment is constantly kind of me iterating the different type of work I want to do in the education sector, and it will continue to change. And I think that's something that I am really open to, is being able to recognize like everything is a constant evolution of like the work. And some days I experience something and I'm like, oh, this is why I'm doing this work. And sometimes I experience something and I'm like, this is why this work is so frustrating. And it just comes kind of day in and day out. And it's just having that like consistent passion, that fire that like makes you work in the education sector, which I do believe you kind of need to have to be in this profession.
Justin?
So I would say kind of align with what was said, but I love the universality of education. And what I mean by that is I got certified as a teacher in Pennsylvania. I was able to transfer my teaching certificate to California. And actually my first year in California, before I started the PhD, I taught 5th grade in Palmdale in Los Angeles County. And that actually allowed me to become a resident. So when I was doing the PhD, I wasn't paying out-of-state tuition. And I ended up having the most amazing year with these 32 wonderful 10-year-olds. But basically from when I finished my undergrad all the way through now, I went back to teaching between school. And I was able to travel to like 60 countries, and I was teaching in different places, getting paid for it, oftentimes getting a free place to stay, free flights. People are like, how are you traveling so much? Like, and doing something you love. It's like, well, teaching everywhere needs teachers. No place in the world doesn't have schools. And so I kind of use this to one, learn about the world, explore myself and talk to people. I think Abby mentioned going to coffee shops and talking to people. That's kind of the same thing I did, just talk to people. And I realized for me, if I wanted to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, so I have a few roommates. One works for this major consulting firm, works 90 hours a week, wakes up at 5, goes to bed at 10 p.m., just terrible. My other roommate works for a huge software company that you probably know, makes crazy amount of money, and just kind of does the work for the money. It's not really about a passion. That's what I love about education. People, as you can see even from the panelists, it's not, if you just want to make money, then you should do something else. There's also ways to make money with this. If you do consulting, there's things about that as well. But I think at the end of the day, as someone who's almost 40, and I'm thinking like, okay, so what, am I glad I did what I did? And I'm like, absolutely yes. I'm producing research that I feel is actually going to be used. I feel that when I go back in the classroom in the next year or two, that I'm able to work with undergrads again as a professor. And I think that it's good to also, my brother taught me this, if you have an itch, scratch it early. So if you want to try med school, if you want to take the LSAT, if you want to do the MCAT or whatever it is that you want to do and explore it, you should do it. Because what you don't want to do is reach your late 20s, 30s and regret it. Because at that point, you might have a family, it might be more difficult, more challenging. And I have a bunch of friends. One of my best friends is a special ed teacher, junior high in San Diego. And he went to law school in Pennsylvania, hated law school, got out of it. Then he tried something else, hated it, got out of it. But now he can really enjoy when he went back to school at USC. Sorry to mention USC, but he went to USC and he's getting his doctorate of education in school leadership to be a school principal. But all of these itches that he had, he was able to get out. And I think that it's important to be honest with yourself. It's important to be honest with others. It may take you away from education. You may find that another field in technology or a STEM related field is better for you. That's great. And maybe 10, 15 years down the road, you can actually combine those fields together. On that, again, I think someone else mentioned the interconnectedness of education. I think it was Shane mentioning how you can do education. It hits all places and all variants of life. And so I would just say, be honest with yourself, be passionate. I know a lot of people who make crazy amounts of money and hate their lives, and they're just not fun to be around. And they have a lot of stuff they don't even have time to use, where you leave a classroom at the end of the day and you feel so tired sometimes, but it's just amazing. And here's one cool last thing I'll say. Those 5th graders that I taught when I started before my PhD are now going to be seniors in high school. And they reached out to me through email and asked for letters of recommendation for college. And I got to see, pictures of them and all this. And now they're from 10-year-olds to 17, 18-year-olds. And it's just amazing. They said, we remember those things that you said 7 years ago in 5th grade. And we actually did something where I had all of my students apply to college in 5th grade. Now, it sounds crazy, but it was like a writing assignment. And actually Harmeet, a shout out to Harmeet and Amy Gershon, they actually wrote like fake letters of acceptance to the kids who applied to UCLA on letterhead. It was so cute. They still have it. And that's so rewarding, you know, years later, that they're asking me for advice, and it creates this like lifelong relationship. So I would say just be passionate about what you do, be open. You never know where it's going to take you. If you want money, get out of education. If you just care about money, there's ways to combine them. But I think education is so rewarding. And I think the other panelists just show why it's just such a great field to be in.
Thank you for perfectly wrapping that up, Justin. I think you hit all those points very, very, very good. And I think, you know, just to add, I think, you know, just for our students who are here is this career exploration piece doesn't stop when you graduate from UCLA. It happens even afterwards, as all of our panelists have shared. So just a reminder, scratch that itch, as Justin mentioned, and definitely, you know, through these learning experiences, you'll start to develop, you know, a clearer idea or think about different options that you may be thinking about. So thank you. Let's go on to our next question. So what do you find the most challenging and most rewarding about your work? So Abby, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's a hard question. Yeah, I think, to be candid, right? So what's challenging about this work is working in a system that was designed to exclude people and oppress people. So how do you work in a system where you care about social change and equity, and it wasn't set up to do those things? It was literally set up as, you know, tools of assimilation into a white-centric expansionist ideology. Like how do we do this work? So I think that is the most challenging part of the work, is working in a system that was designed to exclude and oppress and work against the grain. I often think about it as like, sometimes like there's a boulder that's like kind of falling on me, and I'm just like chipping away at it slowly and slowly. But if I get enough people chipping away at it, the boulder will be removed and we can redesign the whole damn thing. And I think that is really where the work becomes rewarding, is when you start to really push those changes. And I think most of those changes happen on a relational level. So working person to person, or teacher to student, or colleague to colleague, whatever it might look like in your day-to-day, I think it's by far the most rewarding part, is building the relationships. And then those relationships to counteract some of the systemic structural pieces that are very much apparent in my day-to-day work, and also are part of the why I'm here, which is to hopefully redesign and reimagine. And that is kind of as probably succinctly as I can say it for now. I could probably go on a rant, but I will avoid doing so.
Thank you, Abby. Nora?
Yeah, I would like to second what Abby said, 100%. I think something else that's challenging in my specific position is there are a lot of choices that you have to make every day. And sometimes it's not clear what the best course of action is. You know, it's not like a test where it's either A, B, or C. There are just, you know, a lot of different things that could happen, and you have to kind of evaluate and figure out what is going to be the best outcome for students. And so I think something that has helped with that for me is just making sure that no matter what choice I make, having a reason behind that, so that if someone comes to you and says, you know, why did you do that? You can at least justify the choices that you're making. I think the most rewarding thing, and I think everyone said it and I've said it, but it's just working with students and knowing that you're a part of something bigger. Being in that academic environment, you know, you don't have to have a PhD to be a part of that environment still, which is something that's really amazing. And, you know, you might not be actually doing the research, but you are still a part of that research in a way because you're supporting it. So I think that's what I find most rewarding.
Thank you, Nora. Justin?
So I'm doing a postdoc research fellow. So this is actually the first year I didn't have to teach since I was like 19 or 20, which is crazy. And so I'll tell you real briefly. So I just finished the data collection in a study where I interviewed 32 barbers of color, mainly African American from all over the United States. They are the barbers who cut hair, and they're trained in suicide prevention. So they took like this course, and I spent about an hour, half an hour to 90 minutes interviewing over the last several months these 32 different barbers, asking them, what's going on in your communities? What are you learning about mental health, especially among the communities that they live in? Interpersonal violence, community violence, domestic violence is very high. A lot of it is gun-related violence, and also suicide is high. And so one of the most challenging things with my work is just digging so deeply into people's lives, hearing these stories, and just thinking, wow, I have such a major responsibility to create an article that can be shared with a lot of people, that can learn about what's going on in other places in the world they might not otherwise know. And so it's kind of funny, the challenge of the work is the most rewarding part of it, because if I use the skills I learned during my research program at UCLA, if I spend the time, which I'm doing 8 to 10 hours a day now, and I'm just sitting and writing and editing and thinking, re-listening to recordings, but knowing at the end of the day, and I'm happy to send this to you guys in the spring when it's published, but I'm at the end of the day knowing, wow, all of these years of work I learned about research, or all of these experiences in teaching, even aside from research, all this experience with teaching and learning about how to work with people in the community, learning how to listen to people. This is now kind of all culminating in these projects that I'm doing. So it's hard. It's really emotionally hard. It's also, I'm a very social person. I hate Zoom. I hate all of this stuff. I want to be in a classroom, or I want to be in front of people doing a lecture. But it's also rewarding because it slows us down. And I think that at the end of the day, when you do something you're passionate about and you enjoy, it's rewarding. And I would say also, I'm sure everybody on the panel can say as well, the most rewarding things come from the things that are most challenging, because you kind of have a buy-in to what you're doing. Where if I were just to interview a few people and write a quick newspaper article, I'd probably forget about it. Spending the last 6 months delving into this, knowing it's going to be something bigger, is more challenging, but produces more fruit in the end.
Thank you, Justin. Shane?
I think that everyone else has summed it up really nicely. Abby talks about it in the exact same way that I typically talk about how challenging this work is it is impossibly difficult to see systemic inequities up front and personal every single day, see the roadblocks that are intentionally set in front of our students in our communities, to consistently oppress. And it is hard to work within a system that has been designed to actively hurt our kids. But like Justin was saying, honestly, that the hardest work is the part that always is the most rewarding too. I think that of all my teacher friends, typically the student who might give you the most headaches is also one of the students that you love the most. I have 2 pictures of my kids right above my computers. And it is absolutely incredibly rewarding to be working directly with students. And it's, for me now as a recruiter, it is rewarding when I get to see people that I recruited posting a picture of a nice note that a kid gave them, or calling me and being like, I just had my first like really, really good lesson, and like seeing people incrementally, like Abby was talking about, like break down that boulder and seeing people start breaking down those structures. And one other really rewarding part about the work that I do is seeing people who grew up specifically in our low-income communities go back and teach within their same community. One of my interns, Giselle, she is like one of my favorite human beings that have ever existed. She's actually interning with me still while she's still teaching. And she got placed to teach in Southgate, LA, which is where she's from. And she is teaching at the school that her little sister used to go to. And that to me is where the real change happens. Like, yeah, I went out to New York. I don't know New York very well. I had to work really hard to personally assimilate rather than making my kids assimilate. But I love seeing people who know their communities already, who want to go make long-term change in a community that they grew up in, being able to make an impact there. And then living vicariously through all of their terrible days and all of their great days, and being that person, they're like, Shane, I need help with lesson planning. I'm like, I got you. But being that like kind of mentor to other brand new teachers is a really, really awesome part of my job.
Thank you, Shane, and thank you everyone for sharing what the most rewarding and most challenging thing is about your work. And I can see, just by what you all are sharing, that it's kind of what Justin, I'm gonna echo you again. It's what's the most rewarding is, or the most challenging could be the most rewarding, right? And so that's the beauty about being in this field. I definitely echo that. So now I had a couple more questions, but we want to give the students an opportunity to ask their questions. And for those students who are still here, feel free to put your questions on the Q&A so that way our panelists can have an opportunity to answer your questions. And just a reminder, we will have a networking session from 4 to 4:30 where you can meet these panelists more on an individual basis. So please stay on for that. But for now, let's see here. So let's go on with the first one. If we have a follow-up question for a panelist or want to conduct an informational interview, how would we reach out to contact them? So would you be open to sharing your maybe LinkedIn or any contact information? Okay, so I can definitely send that follow-up information in the email if you've checked in or registered to this event, okay? Next question. In what ways do you think this pandemic will have lasting effects on the future of education? Anybody would like to take a stab at it? Abby?
I can take a first go. I think that there's going to be many lasting impact. I think it's a great question, first of all, and it's something that I'm sure all of us are consistently thinking about. One thing I think that this pandemic has made very clear for everybody is the very much kind of what we've all been sharing, the structural inequities that do exist are no longer even for a second invisible. It has been, highlighted within this pandemic on all levels, right? From health to education to other forms of public goods. And so I think what absolutely needs to happen from here is to recognize and acknowledge that these inequities very much are stark and begin to rebuild and no longer kind of push the same old status quo that has worked since the beginning. And we've seen such creativity in this pandemic in certain like small, very small spaces that we kind of see that pop up, and how to share those best practices is going to be really important so that others can learn. Because I think for a lot of folks, you have just been kind of stuck band-aiding these situations that are happening, and Zoom education is not the answer. I am like very confident on that. So I think that we need to learn from some of the creativity that has happened in smaller pockets, but also recognize and take action on the inequities that have occurred. And that would be my starting place if I ran the world of education.
Well, I signed Abby up to run the world of education, and I want to first of all say yes, co-sign all of those things. And also, I know from our teachers, they're learning so many new additional ways to incorporate technology into the work that they do every single day. And I also know that my partner, I met him in Teach for America, a long, gross love story, but I see him teaching his students with learning disabilities right now. Specifically, he's a special education teacher in LAUSD, and some parts of virtual learning actually can work better for students if they're done in a proper way. So he's seen a lot more students who are like just have a task list in front of them and they can like check off everything. There's not as much fear about getting a question wrong when you have more one-on-one time. So I think that there are going to be bits that we're going to want to steal from the virtual learning process, allowing for more independent work or group work or projects or whatever is working for kids, and hopefully more flexibility on teachers' parts. I think that this has also given teachers a lot more insights into like what the home lives of kids are, because we are all in our homes, and it will give teachers a lot more insights. And I think empathy and sympathy and flexibility with students, I would hope will continue to increase long lasting after this pandemic.
Anyone else before we continue to the next question?
I think they sort of said everything that I was also thinking. You know, it is sort of an opportunity to press reset, and hopefully that is an opportunity that is taken. And I do think it has really opened people's eyes into what Shane was saying, what the home lives of these students are, what the realities are, and maybe giving teachers more empathy and also parents more empathy as well. But yeah, I think that they covered it.
Alrighty, thank you all. So the next question is a little bit more specific. So if anybody knows of any information, please feel free. So the question is, what are some lesser known jobs in education, such as ed tech, etc.? Would anybody know more info on that?
So Karen's so the next question, she says, well, what are some research institutes she can get involved in? I'm going to kind of put her, for the sake of time, put her two questions together because I actually think they're connected. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was get outside of your head, even get off the computer and really start making connections with people, even during a pandemic. And what I mean by that is, so the reason I live in Boston, I never ever thought I would live in Massachusetts. I found that there's these two authors that kept coming up in my dissertation. Who are these people? And they were at the School of Public Health. And I emailed them directly and said, hey, here's my dissertation. I talked a lot about your research. And they said, well, why don't you come up? I was in Philadelphia, where I'm from. Come up for lunch and let's meet. So I took a bus up, met up with them, and then they offered me a position to do a visiting scientist with them. And so that later turned into something else. But it was that literal emailing them and saying, hey, you know, here's my stuff. Can I talk to you on Zoom for 20 minutes and get to know you, ask people? So especially when I was a TA at UCLA, I did for 3 years, I always told my students, be proactive, like literally email professors. If you want to do a grad program, email a professor that you think their research is interesting. You go online, find a tech industry, a job that you're interested in, or a research organization, email them. They're just people. And a lot of them, because they're in the field of education, they're going to be probably more friendly than people outside of the field. So if you're emailing a medical doctor, maybe they're too busy. Emailing someone in business, they're like, just go to my LinkedIn. Education really has this more kind of grassroots, fun, kind of interactive feel to it. So I would say be proactive, whether you are from Philadelphia, LA, China, Germany, wherever. One of the great things is you have a UCLA name behind you. And when they see ucla.edu, it really does carry a lot of weight. And they go, wow, you know, send a short email to somebody, they see it, they're going to open it. I would say 9 times out of 10 in my experience, when I was interacting with people from UCLA, they were really receptive and they were just really happy to talk to me. People, the thing people love talking about the most is themselves. So if you reach out to an organization and say, hey, tell me more about your research, or what are ways that I can get involved, and here's my background, can you give me advice? People are really, really open to that. So I would say be proactive, be direct, email, keep the email short. You know, don't want to send them a book about yourself, but you'll be really surprised, and those will open up doors that you might otherwise not find.
I was also just going to add something that, you know, at a job fair that focuses on education or the education sector, those that are there often have a recruitment branch, right? Like they have enough funds to be there, to have that kind of network built in. So if you're someone who's interested in ed tech or institute of like policies that do work on education research, like quickly, I'm sure like a job fair, Google search will like get you there. If you're interested in more like grassroots, like community organizing type educational nonprofits or cooperatives, or kind of more niche, maybe on the ground level, that really, to kind of what Justin was saying, like really takes that person to person connection and also being in and of the community as well. So I think that that is something that I would also recommend. Like if you know physically, geographically where you want to be, or if you have a connection to that area, I would definitely recommend just like doing some footwork, like walking around and meeting people when it's obviously safe to do so, and recognizing like who are the organizations that I would want to see here that aren't. And then ask those organizations that are there, like, have you heard of an organization that does kind of like this, but maybe on a more grassroots level? Like they'd be, I'm sure, happy to connect you, because at the end of the day, we're all in this sector working to improve the lives of the young people in our classrooms and schools and community organizations.
Actually, real quickly, when to piggyback off that, that's really great advice, because also you're at UCLA. It means you're paying money to work with these professors who come from really great places, who know lots of great people. And if you work hard in their class or they like you, they can forward an email on your behalf. And those definitely will be read. And also I want to encourage you, create your own path, right? You can combine different fields. You were talking about ed tech. Great, reach out to a tech organization. They don't have an education field, propose it to them and say, hey, this is my background. This is you. You have this, you lack this, I have this, I lack this. Together we can create this. And literally just propose it. The worst they can say is no. And the best they could say is, well, let's give it a shot and move out here and we'll see what happens. And it's crazy. I've heard a lot of stories. These things can happen.
Mm-hmm. And don't underestimate the ability for one connection to lead you to another. So just the other day, I was talking to a UCLA alum who's in her second year of teaching, and she was like considering recruitment sort of work. And then she's also thinking about ed tech. And I was like, oh, I have like 2 or 3 people I want to connect you over with. And then she's now talking to people at Amazon, people at Google, and people at Facebook. And like, that is because I know people in those sectors. So it's not who you know, it's like who the person you know knows. It's expanding those networks. It's those degrees of separation. So even if there's someone who you're like, this doesn't totally relate to where I want to go, but it's like on a path, they might know more people in that sector or in a like neighboring sector, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, these informational interviews, and students, again, like if you're having trouble on how to word that or how to reach out, like come to the Career Center. We can help you start that process. Okay, so we are out of time. I know we had a couple more questions, but I would then invite our students to come into the networking session. This is where you'll be able to talk more more in a smaller group level with these panelists. They all have really great experiences and have really shared a lot in terms of their own journey. And so I recommend that you take this opportunity to connect with them and ask them questions and follow-up questions about what they just said. At this point, I also want to give a big thank you to Nora, Justin, Abby, Shane for being here today and sharing your experiences and your journey. As you could see, we had a lot of students come in and they were really just interested in learning more about the different avenues of education. So thank you. So at this point, join us at the networking portion. We will have Nora, Justin, Abby, and Shane in different breakout rooms so that you can meet with them again in a more smaller setting to ask a lot of these really great questions. All righty, everybody. Have a good one, and I'll see you at the other Zoom.